We're going to cover cities today. Cities in the Venus Project. How will they differ from conventional cities? Of course, a city would depend on the population size. The population size would depend on how far we are from resources. So that each of the cities will have a configuration necessary to maximize the function of each city. A description of cities. Those of you that have seen pictures of them, they are circular in arrangement. The reason for the circular configuration is that in some instances, if the city is divided into 16 parts or 8 parts, that we only do one segment of the city and then repeat that segment continuously. That saves a lot of energy and a lot of design time. The center of the city will be the managing area, the computerized area. The center of the city will also have facilities such as access to resources, medical care, dental care, schools. Everything will be in the center. That makes it possible for each segment of the city to function at the optimal level. Of course, the cities, instead of having parks, will be immersed in lovely gardens. The city itself will be a park. Instead of having little areas set aside as a park, outside the radius of the city, there'll be dwellings, either individual houses or apartment houses. It's a circular configuration that enables us to maximize the air conditioning, also the orientation and shape of the buildings. The buildings will be so shaped to permit air circulating through it. We will take advantage of the position of the sun and all of the other factors included. The buildings will be made of materials that require minimum maintenance. The exterior of the buildings will be a textured ceramic-like material, which requires minimum maintenance. The rooftop of the buildings will be comprised of ceramics that are photoelectric generators. Not only that, they will serve as corrugated surfaces to strengthen the roof itself. Instead of using tile roofs, which are nothing but dead weight, the building itself will be comprised of corrugations which support the roof. Of course, if it's dome-shaped, you don't need the corrugations. The ceramic material will be part of the roof itself. Not only that, the roof will be made of curved sections in some instances. The curved sections will be metallized to reflect the heat on pipes at the focal point of the curvature so that we get energy from that system. So it isn't just a roof. It's a photoelectric generator. It provides for hot water. It provides for longevity and provides for many different purposes. All of the roof elements are connected by prefabricated elements which make fabrication and change relatively easy. The building material itself will consist of a sandwich which is porous in the center and solid at both ends. In other words, in that way you won't have much condensation and you'll get maximum advantage of your structure. As the cities are updated, they can be disengaged and changed as required in the future. The housing will be the shortest distance away from the areas that people work at. As long as people work and serve during the transition, they will be no more than 3 or 4 minutes away from the workplace. So you have to spend a half hour driving to work or an hour driving to work. In other words, there'll be transportation units that take you all around the city and you get off at whatever radial belt you work at or you're occupied at. The circular conveyor will stop at the radial arms and you take the conveyor, the radial spokes, to the area that you work at. Probably no more than 5 or 6 minutes to get to work. Instead of having a kitchen in every home, which in the future will vary, you will have dining areas with all kinds of food equipped and prepared by nutritional experts for different age groups. So the food will be engineered. When I use the term engineered, I mean selected on the basis of physical requirements. Now, of course, the taste of the community is very important. They will select the kind of taste and flavors that they want. Will it be a democracy? If by democracy you mean participation of everybody in the community in decision making, they will make recommendations, all members of society. The recommendation will be made by a computerized system. And each recommendation will be weighed on the basis of merit, energy conservation, and material conservation. So people will participate according to each one's ability to participate. Mostly in the structural design, that will be accomplished by structural engineers. In the city design, that will be constructed by time and motion studies to get the maximum to all people. If you just have a bunch of opinions coming in, not based on any studies, I don't think you can get the best results. So when you use the term participatory democracy, how qualified are the people to participate? No one judges the qualification except their suggestions. Their suggestions are weighed against certain principles, energy determinants. And on that basis, that would be the operation of the city. All roads, all transportation systems will be linked to one city after the other. The city system will be linked to the central zone of the city or the outer perimeter. Transportation units will eventually eliminate the need for motor vehicles, except for emergency vehicles. Motor vehicles are really a poor method of transportation. I would say that a sort of a train, not necessarily maglev. Maglev would be between cities or monorails. The train system is a more efficient system and can take you almost to your doorstep. So you don't need an individual vehicle for each person, although they would be available if necessary. I would say the emergency vehicles have priority over all other vehicles, meaning human illness. Since hospitals and all physical equipment is in the middle of the city, you have the most efficient arrangement. Now, how will people participate? In whatever area they serve best. Many people will be multidisciplinarians, so they can serve in many different areas. Before submitting an opinion, they will carefully examine it and put it to test and talk to others about it before submission of ideas. The city itself will have an appearance related to its function. The function of the city is designed first. Whatever the buildings look like reflect the function of the buildings. You do not design a city and fill it in. You design a function and cover it. Whatever that looks like, that's what the cities look like. In other words, a hospital will look like the best way to serve as many people as can be served. The interior of the hospital will be the best for physicians to work in, for lighting, energy determinants, comfort of the people. So you have everything designed on the basis of human need. The artist, for example, might make suggestions. If the suggestions are relevant, they will be used. If they're merely pictorial, now sometimes pictures in a building will make it more comfortable for the patients. So we will use the arts and we will use entertainment if that entertainment reinforces the patients. Dietitians will prepare the food for the hospitals and for physical activities, and there will be sufficient design to permit change. Hospital beds and equipment will be designed to minimum the stress and strain on nurses. Instead of lifting a heavy weight person out of bed, In the future, I doubt that there be very many heavy people, but if that condition warrants the installation of new equipment, equipment will be designed to move patients from the bed to a carriage to surgery. All of the buildings will be completely fireproof, everything in the building. And what you can do is design electrical circuitry so that in case of failure of any equipment, there's another piece of equipment that can take over. During the transition, meaning from the old monetary system to the new social design, there will be problems. And the problems will be identified as we move along. Once the city is completed, the conduct of human beings will undergo change. Just as you change the environment, it changes the behavior of people. When people have access to the necessities of life without appealing to another person or a group or what they think is a group that manages, there's no group that manages. There's provisions made for the needs of people, and they're accessible as people demand those things. So you don't have an elitist group. You don't have a control group. You just have technical competence in every area of human function. I would say that, in general, covers cities.
How about the roadways and how the city will generate electricity and the agriculture?
Well, the agricultural belt will be usually on the outer perimeters. The energy and factories for production to meet the city needs will be in the surrounding areas, the outlying areas. There'll be areas set aside for unique and unusual developments. In other words, the whole city is never complete. There are always areas set aside for innovation. In other words, the city will be a changing thing just as people continue to change. So will the cities, so will the shape of cities, and so will their function. Underneath the roadways will be all of the service functions. But there'll be more shelves in the service functions to receive lasers or whatever other equipment might be installed. So instead of chopping up the highway every few years to put in new installations, there'll be a grading that's lifted up, and that grading provides people with access to the shelving and all the new installations. I would say that energy would be geothermal in many areas. In some areas there'd be solar heaters, but usually the architectural design of the buildings themselves would take advantage of prevailing wind currents and air circulation. Nothing is designed arbitrarily. Nothing is designed on the basis of ego, or nothing is designed to please an artist. They're always designed to serve the maximum function. And so, if that scares you, you'll have to consider the human body. Everything that you have on the body serves some kind of function. You have a few organs that are undergoing change called vestigial organs that are no longer serviced. I would say that in the future, most people, and just like their organs, their cities will serve maximum function for the development, meaning the ongoing process of all people. The institutions that exist, such as traditions, Christmas holidays, all of those things will be updated so that the function of the city will provide for more human needs than ever. There will be more expression, more individuality than ever dreamed of in the old monetary system, and more individuality. The purpose of the future is to generate individuality, creativity in the arts and sciences in all areas. Now, there's no limit to what humans can accomplish, and we see no limitations in any area if given the necessary environment to work in. No more digging up nickels and dimes for medical research in heart disease or any other physical ailment. Every lab is best equipped with whatever we can provide to enable them to solve problems. And that, in essence, is a high compression of a city system. Of course, if you have questions later on, you can arrange questions regarding what I talked about in relation to the city. If you have specific questions, and that goes for education as well, when you have specific educations, after you review our film on education and the schools of the future, after you review that, then you can prepare questions that you feel have not been answered. So we will do sequences, various social aspects of the future, which is open to questions for everyone.
I'm thinking of because we're going to be showing photos and drawings.
As
of the
many
city.
as you can.
I wish you were in front of the city, talking about the city, you know?
Use whatever shots
Yeah.
you can.
Do you want to talk about the recreational belt? Because that's...
The recreational belt and recreation is based upon moving the human body to maximize its function. In other words, the type of movement, such as swimming, is one of the maximum areas of physical exercise. There are certain aspects of sports that are not good for the human body. So those will be determined, and the type of activity for the future will be based upon studies of physiology and the human body. So I would say that instead of anything where people wrestle and jump on one another and land on top of another person, I would say that would serve no useful function. Of course, we all get used to things. We learn to like bullfights, baseball games, boxing, all of those part of an ancient culture. The culture of the future will consider the human body as the maximum thing to get that to function well. And the type of activities will be that which emphasizes the development of the human body, whether it be gentle movements, whether it be swimming, but there'll be no activities designed for the ego. I would say that would pretty much.
Do you want to hit on competition, since you're talking about sports?
Well, there's really no competition in the future. There are people sharing ideas as to how to swim and how to get the most movement with the minimum amount of strokes, such as keeping your fingers together, rolling your body with the movements. All of those things will be part of the educational system, how to use the body intelligently. And so that will be an ever-changing process growing alongside of nutrition. And I would say that the reason that there's no need for competition, what there's need for is to learn how to use your body wisely, how to take advantage as you get older so you become less subject to age diseases. I would say all of the subjects of the future will be related, again, to maximizing human function. The reason for competition in the old monetary system evolved as part of social evolution. I would say in the future, the sharing ideas would be the most beneficial for people. Keeping ideas to yourself is part of the self-centered system that we live under today, where we're all looking after our own well-being. In the future, when you look after protection and prevention in the environment, prevention of physical disorders, prevention of plant diseases, and the understanding of the conditions that make things difficult for people. So I would say that, yes, there's some forms of difficulty which are useful for people. There are forms of experience that does require some stress. In other words, learning how to use stress intelligently. Keeping it to yourself, you might win competitions, but it doesn't improve the grade of people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, if you say, well, I like individual development, well, then that person needs additional instruction. You say, do you depend on electricity? Yes. Do you know anything about it? No. There are people that are serving you. You serve people too. The point is, self-serving systems do nothing but degenerate society. multi-serving systems are beneficial to everybody. If Edison kept the electric light to himself and never explained anything to anybody, it would be all right for Edison, but detrimental to society. The more we share, we open up schools, learn electrical engineering, chemical engineering, for as many people that are interested. But if you just teach one or two people how to operate society, your dependency is dangerous. It's dangerous to depend on highly qualified people. There must be a lot of people that are highly qualified by their performance only. In other words, it's how well you do the job. Now, there are people that cannot perform as well as others due to the energy levels. Their body has a different amount of output. You have to take that into consideration. Nutrition, their lifestyle, whether the guy's girlfriend left him, all those different things. But people will be raised in a psychological environment to understand how to let go, how not to cling to people as if they leave you, that's a decision they make. You have to respect the different decisions that people make due to their background. But keeping your decisions as the prime decisions is dangerous. Only the way I think about things is the right way. There are many different ways to think about things. When you teach children how they learn from environment, how environment shapes behavior, they themselves will begin to compose environments to shape behavior for a specific outcome. Would they be robots-like if you engineer behavior? You're always engineering behavior. When a person goes to church, their behavior is engineered. People's behavior is always controlled. Whether you're a gypsy, an airline pilot, you're always telling your kids, I want you to be a carpenter, I want you to be a teacher, I want you to be a lawyer. That's always controlled. The difference is, in the future, the controls are not arbitrary. They're based upon statistical data and criticism. The society of the future is in a constant state of examination and re-examination so that we don't get stuck on any one set of values. The system is always open to criticism, but the criticism in the future will not be terms like, I don't think it'll work. It'll have to show specifics why things don't work, rather than ego. Now, the person that's a very good teacher will teach teachers how to teach. That goes for everything. So, will people have similar abilities? Yes. They will know what they don't know, and they will know when they ought not to offer an opinion in a given area because they don't have enough information. They might say, I'd like to look into that. I'll come back in 3 weeks and discuss it further. But they don't just go blindly into things. They know where to find information.
In terms of the city, do you want to talk about the lighting in the housing and the different color changes and everything?
Yeah, well, I would say that by using a new type of paint, or if you call it paint, or coating, by using a new type of coating, you can change the color of the building by turning a dial, the interior and exterior. That would be based upon individual preference and association with colors. If colors stimulate people to work harder, do a better job, then buildings will be utilized color as the technique. If food of a different color pleases the person more so psychologically, they digest food better. If it's colored to meet their approval, those systems will be used. Whatever system works will be used.
You talked about before the little beads. Do you want to describe that? Or?
No.
All right. Well, yeah, you did that at one of the lectures, remember?
No, I don't need to give the detail of that.
Okay.
We will use a prism effect, essentially. That will tell some people how to work it. But there are many different things, new professions in the future. And I would say every few months or so, there'd be a lot of new professions. People in the middle of school will be shifting their profession. Not to some arbitrary profession, to some profession that became useful.
How do you allocate scarce resources in an advanced kind of city where you've got a resource type of economy going on?
Well, the Germans used the word Ersatz. Are you familiar with it?
Yes. Yeah.
They had developed, they didn't have access to a lot of resources, but they did have a lot of good technicians, and they had a lot of labs. And they told them what was lacking, and they told them at the labs what they required of new materials. And we had a shortage of those materials that respond to those requirements. Can you come up with anything else that can do that? You have to give those assignments to different labs. Material development. In other words, let's say we ran out of steel, or Swedish steel, which is very perfected. Then maybe some branch of carbon fibers might replace that. You understand what I mean? Different research in different areas can replace almost all materials. Whenever you have a shortage of anything, it isn't the shortage, it's the characteristics of the material, not the shortage. You want a material that's strong, flexible, and doesn't fatigue or crack. You name and specify what you want. It's the characteristics of the material, not the material. Do you understand that? So in the future, engineers will be trained in terms of what are the characteristics needed, not what I think is needed. What are the characteristics needed? Did I answer your question, Joel?
Well, that's good, but assuming that can be done. Now, if we have a resource that we're simply unable for some period of time to replace, how do we allocate that resource meanwhile until that's addressed?
I would say on the macro and microscopic level, we will examine materials and identify what the word strength means, what the word bond means. Bond means that a very rigid material, when you drop it, tends to break like glass. That's rigid. That's called a rigid bond. A rubber band has a loose bond between the molecules. They can be pulled apart, but if you get beyond a certain distance, they snap. So you have to know what is bond, what is strength on the microscopic level. And then you work on the microscopic level to put those characteristics into your new materials. After all, they're only characteristics. So if you know what they are, but if you don't know what elasticity means, what rigidity means, if they're just words, you can't innovate. Do you understand? If you look at a thing under a microscope and you see particles attract each other, at a certain distance, you go beyond that, they let go. That's called the elastic limit. If you begin to use language like that, you have the methods of investigation built in. But if you use, we need a stronger material, that tells you nothing. We need material with a flexible bond. Sometimes we want it to stretch, sometimes we don't want it to stretch. How much stretch? How much yielding? How much bonding? In other words, once you start getting specific, you know what you're looking for. A lot of people think scientific research is going into a lab and finding the answers. No, it's stating the problem. Do you understand what I'm saying? What is aberrant behavior? Behavior that destroys or hurts the direction of society. Identify that type of behavior. Then there's a whole list of behavior that hurts society. And then what type of society or what type of behavior is useful to society. You have to identify it, not only identify it, show how it is useful. In other words, the more accurate the descriptive system, the more accurate society. And if you live in a primitive society where language is still evolving, you got a long way to go. It isn't that there'll be English majors in the future. There'll be linguists that understand language needs a physical referent in order to talk about things. You talk about the characteristics of a material, not I like that material, it's good, it's strong, it's desirable. That tells a person nothing.
Were you trying to ask how resources would be used if there are limits on the resources? How they'd
In
be
a sense,
allocated?
how would scarce resources be allocated if there is a period of time where they're not
Fully developed.
able to be replaced? In other words, if we can't come up for 50 years with a replacement
doubt
for
that.
steel, well, but let's say if there is a compound that's
Yes, assuming there are certain materials that are not abundant in supply, they will be allocated on the basis of the function of the group. Do you know what that means?
if you can explain it some more. Yeah.
The people that need that serve maximum function, will have access to that first. But more labs will be assigned to research that's scarce. In other words, if you have a scarcity of a certain type of material, more labs are assigned that problem. How many labs, depending on how far along you are. You can't get anything out of primitive people. You can only show them how to plant food, cut down the dead trees, utilize the environment as a physical entity. Remember, if you go to Africa, you can harness people. You can have them work with technicians, and the technician will assign them things they can handle if they're not technical. They can wash things, store them, dry them, prepare things. So you use resources, that's what it means, the intelligent management of the Earth's resources, meaning using limited resources wisely. Wisely means appropriately. The word wise doesn't tell us anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I need to I need to specify my question in a different way, so I have to think about it some more.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Because you always hung up with the society you live in and the values superimposed upon you.
Are you trying to say how is it determined how a material is used if it is scarce at a certain time?
Yes, I
You
answered that.
Yeah, you answered that. Was that the question now?
Whether or not you understand all my answers, that's something
I'd
else.
probably like to go into certain details of that. I mean, you could have a whole talk on just that topic probably, right?
You have to have a physical reference.
Yeah.
When you use the term a flexible material, you have to see it on an atomic level, on a chemical level. All those things have to be visual so that you have a referent. If you have no referent, you have to find a referent. That requires microscopic examination, photography of elasticity. You know what that means? Photographing materials being stretched, how they become thin and they break. You have to show all the things you talk about, so when kids talk to each other in the future, they have a very clear reference of what they're talking about, because the kid will say, what is your reference for strength of material? And the kid says bond, and they know what that means. They know loose bond means a rubber band or dough or flexible material when they talk of loose bond. When they say, how do you strengthen bond? That means how do you increase the cohesion of materials? That might be heat treatment or chemical formulas. But every chemist does research and collects data on bonding materials, different chemicals that are used to bond, so they have big lists. So when you have a research lab, you can consult with the chemist and say, what are your reference for physical bonds? And they'll give you a whole list, which are additional tools. What if materials don't have a strong bond? Can you increase their bond, their attraction? And you know where to look for that. Don't forget, people know where to look for things. Today they go to the library and they look under human behavior. And many of those books are not about human behavior. They're about the results of environment upon behavior.
Do you want to change your view a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
What time do you want to leave?
Well, we have a little more time than I thought. We could go whatever you want. And I mean, we have to leave, we have to stop probably in about 20 minutes filming.
What's that?
We have to stop filming in about 20 minutes. We have a little more time than I thought.
Okay.
It's at 2 o'clock, the appointment.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this right. I think it was technocracy that they used like a unit of heat as a way, as an agent to measure the value of a commodity, right? Is that
Energy.
how- yeah. So I
The
think
amount of energy it took to make something.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
But that's what limited energy. All those are based upon scarcity or lack of resources. I don't see after the global survey and energy is allocated to different regions, I see a different approach.
But until we have that survey, we can't really say we have enough resources at this
Well,
point.
that's a instruction time.
Yeah.
During the transition, it's all instruction and discussion.
Because I get that a lot from people,
What do you get?
that we
We
don't
don't
really
have
know
enough
how
energy.
much resources we have to support. Say we have 6-7 billion people now. A lot of people say we don't know if we have enough to support that
Well,
many.
you have to find out. Otherwise, you can't make a decision.
I usually tell them within this paradigm we probably don't,
Yes,
within what we're in now.
sure.
So,
If you can state the problem, you're pretty much halfway through. But if you can't state the problem, you can't solve it either. You can say, well, we must learn to lay our weapons aside and make peace. How do you do that? That's a very complex system. So people really don't even talk about problems. They talk a lot on TV about the elections, but they never talk about problems. They say we have limited funds. We can't give everybody medical care without taxing the wealthy. Well, the wealthy people say, I don't want to be out there supporting everybody's ailments. I worked hard for the money I have. I don't want to be overtaxed. So you got all these vested interests. And with vested interests, there are no solutions. So if you want to work within the system of vested interests, it means society will destroy each other. That's what it means to me. But if you are willing to, if you are able to go along with this as the closest method to being fair, the word fair is a terrible word. When I use the term statistical data and engineering and scientific principles applied to society is the nearest thing to decency and ethics. But I don't know what decency and ethics mean unless you say it's a method of making things available to everybody. Then I know what you're talking about. But if you use the word, we need more ethics in society, everybody will agree. But they haven't agreed upon anything. Do you know what that means? How many believe in the good life? All the hands go up. What is the good life? A good ball game, a good boxing match. What is the good life? If you have no agreements, you're talking to yourself or you're talking at the other person. Very few people talk to one another. Believe me, I know it. They don't know how to talk to one another. They don't say, what is it that you want? I want decency and ethics. How do you attain that? I don't know. So your problem is to study how to possibly attain that. Then when you get it, you come back and discuss it. If you don't get it, say, I'm not equipped. There's too many variables that I don't understand. So you may have to spend time in the university lab, 6 months or so. Different people spend different times wherever you get the information. I think in Holland they grow tulips or flowers, but they do spend a lot of time studying what makes a desirable flower. We don't spend as much time on that. We spend more time on nutrition and health and knowledge and how to present ideas. And the method selected will be how well the system works. If you've got a method of presenting things to kids and it works very well, we use that method. If it doesn't work too well, we use some other method. It's how well the system works that determines which method is used. Do you think you understand? Okay.
This is the Venus Project City Systems, right? This is, our topic is talking about the city, right?
Well, I'm talking about many different
Is there any way
aspects.
you could touch on waste disposal or necessary for recycling, maybe water
Well,
conservation?
with the advent of nanotechnology, we can make one material into another material.
How about before that?
Well, then we'll use the best we can, whatever is known at the time.
Well,
That's all you can do.
how is the waste?
You know, during the war, World War II, the gun factories could not turn out enough guns. Did you know that? To train soldiers? So they made dummy guns out of wood. The whole gun was made out of wood. And they all did right shoulder arms, maneuvering of a gun with wooden dummy guns. And that's when you don't have enough to go around, you use substitute materials in whatever way you know how. That's the only thing you can do. I think the Indians used animal skins on their wigwam because they didn't have any other material to use at the time. But there's no options. In the future, there's vinyl materials, there's masonite, there's all kinds of materials that can be redesigned and fabricated and do new ways. So we have many more options today. The more technology is advanced, the greater the options. You'll have to put this out on the web and let me know what kind of reactions you get.
What were you
Remember, there are
asking
people
about?
that will listen to these tapes. I'll repeat myself. There are people that will listen to these tapes but only draw from certain regions of it. They can't draw from all regions of it. So what can a person extract from the information you put out there? By the nature of their questions, I will know what they're drawing from. I can't know that. I can only make assumptions. Do you understand what I'm saying? No matter what you say, people will not hear every word. They'll hear what they can hear. It's the questions that they ask that tell you what they extract. If a person says George Washington was the greatest president, you have to say, tell me 4 things that he did. They usually don't know one thing he did. Do you know that? I've tried it. Whenever they say Roosevelt was a great man, what did he do? They can name more things that he did. CC camps, transit camps, projects like Boulder Dam, Tennessee Valley Authority. They use the unemployed to build vast projects because that would be the cheapest time you can do that. Do you understand? So when a person says Kennedy was a great president, you'd have to specify, did he conserve resources? What did he do? And most people do not know how to do that. They like him because he was a nice guy. He waved to everybody. He had a nice smile, too. A very congealing kind of smile. And I like his choice of clothing. And his wife was a very pleasant person. Well, if I met a very unpleasant person that increased the agricultural yield by 50%, that's a very important guy. Whether his personality is pleasant or whether he never smiles is not important. Do you understand? The ability to extract that which is important. If a guy makes safer airplanes and he's short and fat, that has nothing to do with it. As long as he makes safer airplanes, we want that guy. So we no longer have beauty contests, as you understand, or the best dressed person in America. I don't know if you know they used to have that.
They still do.
Adolf Mancho was considered the best dressed person in America. He was a movie actor. They have so much crap out there. Deciphering the crap is a big problem, too. What is crap? That which benefits one person at the expense of all the others. That's the way I use the word crap. Okay.